All right, good morning. Welcome to another rendition of Gardenside Chats with me, Carrie. We are going to do an Ask an Urban Farmer series today. So I thought I'm over here. Hello, thank you. I thought we would start with the first question, which is about planting things in pots at this time of year. So I wanted to zoom in on this big pot of oregano and chives, and actually I'm going to move the camera so you can see it. We also have some lemon thyme right here. I actually thought it was regular thyme when I planted it, but it turned out to be lemon thyme, and I don't use it as much as I thought. Anyway, so this kind of, this container is pretty large. You can see it's probably about 2 feet tall, and the oregano is starting to trail over. The chives are massive, so they're kind of cascading over the side. Why am I showing you this? We got a question through social media that said, I just moved to Columbia a few weeks back. I'm a beginner gardener and wanted to start some pot vegetables in my backyard, meaning container vegetables. Is it too late for the season? If not, what vegetables can we grow now, and where can you get the seed from? So the reason why I wanted to zoom in on this is because I planted this rather large container with these 3 herbs in it this time last year. And they lived throughout the winter and have been giving me herbs all season. And I've pruned them about 3 times because they've gotten very large, and used those prunings to dry them for future recipes and things like that. I wanted to show you the size of the pot because when you start plants in pots and containers at this time of the year, with the intention of them growing and living or going dormant over the winter, you really want to make sure that the container is pretty large for thermal mass. Anything that grows in a container on top of the ground is going to be colder than the ground. So you might be planting things that can live over the winter, but due to the fact that it's this kind of tiny mass of soil, it's going to be more prone to freezing, which is more prone to damaging your roots and things like that. So you just want to make sure that the container is really larger than you really think it should be. I'm going to try to set the camera down. Pardon me. Can you still see it? Good. Okay. So other than herbs, what can you do right now if you wanted to start a container garden right now? You could, in a large container, just like the one I'm showing you right now, you can do arugula, kale, leaf lettuce, and that's kind of what I would recommend, about the extent of what I would recommend. In about a month, you can try scallions or spinach to overwinter, but again, you want to make sure the pot's really large, and you won't get anything until next spring. Scallions, you'll get a lot of green onions from, and you can grow them in a container forever, years and years and years. Spinach, I don't know if it would be a worthwhile endeavor because you kind of need a lot of space for spinach, and you just might not get a lot of it. So I guess in summation for this question, what I would say is try some small leafy greens like arugula, kale, leaf lettuce in a large container. And if you wanted to grow herbs, you can go buy some herbs, plant them, and they would be perennials in your container if you got the correct types of herbs. Or plant green onions and scallions for harvesting next spring. I got these herbs last year in little containers at Wilson's Garden Center. That's also where I would recommend you go get seeds. Right now is a tricky time to get seeds. Most places that sell seeds only sell them in the spring, but Wilson sells them all year round. Okay, so we are going to move on to the second question, and actually we are going to, walk into the garden. So I'm going to move you, so forgive me. And we're going to walk to the garden to do some more, hello, here I am, to do some more kind of demonstration stuff. So I'm walking back to our garden. The next question we're going to talk about is regarding mulch. So if you watch these a lot, you know that we talk a lot about mulch, and at CCUA we believe a lot in covering the soil and keeping the soil moisture in through mulching and keeping all the microorganisms that live in the soil happy through mulching. But we did have a really good question that came in about what mulching does as far as allowing pests to overwinter. All right, so I'm in my garden now. It's quite sunny. So I'm going to walk over to where we've got a good amount of mulch. Here we go. And I'm going to move the camera back around. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. Okay. So you can see I use leaves. Again, if you ever watch this, I use leaves instead of straw. At the Veterans Urban Farm at the Ag Park, we use straw because it's easier to access in larger quantities, but at home we use leaves. So what you're seeing now is some Swiss chard, some dino kale. Over to the left you see some of my tomatoes, but then this mound right here is a part of a bed that I just remulched with leaves yesterday. Really deeply, I just covered some weeds with cardboard and then put leaves on top because that's my favorite way to kill annual weeds. Okay, so the question is, regarding mulching your aisles with leaves, my husband wonders if that gives bugs a better place to overwinter. So that's a great question. Yes, it does give insects more places to overwinter. A lot of insects overwinter in kind of leaf litter or organic matter, anything that they can kind of crawl under to protect them from the elements. But that is not just a true statement for pest insects. That's also a true statement for beneficial insects. So ladybugs overwinter under leaf litter. Green lacewings, which is a really important beneficial insect in gardening, but maybe not as doesn't have the star status that ladybugs have, can overwinter in leaf litter and organic debris and stuff in your garden. And actually they require things like this to overwinter because cold weather will kill them. And then that's just less green lacewings for you to have next year. And ladybugs and green lacewings are amongst the most voracious predatory pests for things like aphids. So you really want them in your garden. So I guess our philosophy regarding mulching is that, it does give, things like squash bugs and cucumber beetles more of a home, in the wintertime, but it also gives these really good things a home in the wintertime. And our whole goal is to create kind of a little ecosystem that takes care of itself more or less, so that the squash bugs and the cucumber beetles are predated upon by parasites that we give habitat to, and things like that, more that mindset that it's a whole kind of world, and there's a whole food web that we're supporting through our gardening, instead of just making it what we call sanitary and totally clean, totally bare soil, just so that squash bugs and cucumber beetles don't live. We want it to be way more diverse, way messier, because the more robust, diverse, messier, the stronger the ecosystem of your garden. All right. I just realized maybe I should have the camera on myself instead of just on some leaves. But anyway, let's move on to the next question. I forgot to bring my potato fork out. So the next question is, my soil is really hard, compact, and lacking nutrients. What do you recommend so that I can plant directly into my yard in the next few seasons? All right, well, let's go. We're going to move again. Go over to another garden bed that I'm just kind of preparing and have recently planted in, I suppose. So we'll stay here for the next couple questions. Okay, so hopefully, I hope you can see. So you see there's a green framed bed with some greens growing in it in front of some squash plants. So what did I do to the soil? I'm going to zoom in real quick. So you can see the soil is a little like light and crumbly. What I did was, I hadn't grown in this bed actually ever. I'm new to this garden. I don't know how long it had, had just been sitting here. So I got my potato fork, which is it's right here, which is one of my favorite tools. So I would say, first answer to your question, invest in this tool. This is a potato fork. And a potato fork is really great at digging up things like potatoes, carrots, roots, and things like that. But it's also really great at breaking up and aerating soil. Totally unlike a tiller. So a tiller kind of flips the soil around. With the potato fork, what I do is, we'll go over to some bare soil. Gosh, this is so homemade. I stick my foot onto the potato fork, and then you just bring it up, and you can kind of see how the soil is loosening up, and then you just move it over, do it again, and in that way you're actually aerating the soil. You're adding some more air pockets into the soil, but you're not turning the soil over. We don't want to do that. So you're just kind of loosening it up with the potato fork. The potato fork is a great tool. So get a potato fork. Once you kind of loosen up your yard with the potato fork, I would buy mulch. I would buy compost, and I would spread the compost and then mulch on top. And then after you spread the compost, before you put the mulch on, you can potato fork it again, and that kind of works the compost into the soil a little bit. But a lot of it will remain on top, which is okay. That's, nature, soil is used to getting nutrients broken down from the top and slowly working its way into the deeper depths of the soil. So potato fork it again, add straw, and then let it sit over the winter. That's a great way to at least get started. Your soil will still probably be pretty hard, pretty compacted, but those are great first steps. So what the potato fork is going to do is going to loosen the soil. The compost will kind of fill in some of those gaps and bring organic matter deeper into the soil. The mulch will protect it from, dry, cold winds, really cold temperatures. And then all of those things will collectively make for a better soil texture and consistency. And the compost and the mulch and the air, the oxygen that you just added into the ground from the potato fork, will kind of support microbial life in your garden soil. So nothing in gardening is instant gratification, really. So we're still talking kind of a long process, but those are really great things you can do now to prepare for a better garden next spring. So that's what I would suggest doing if your, ground is lackluster. And then if next year you have more patience and want to do more things to prepare your soil for, longer term gardening, I would add some cover crops. The roots will break up the soil. They'll also add organic matter, also some nitrogen into the soil. Depending on the cover crops, they would add nitrogen into the soil, and then that would just get you even on a better foot. That's actually what we did at the agriculture park. We spent a year and a half just getting the soil ready before we planted any vegetables out there. And that was a mix, because it's a much larger scale than a garden. We actually did use some tractor work out there. But we killed a perennial weed out there through some tractor work, and then we added lots and lots of compost, lots of soil amendments, and then lots and lots of cover crops. And that was our strategy over a season and a half to get the soil ready. And this is our first full season growing out there, and it's been doing fabulously. So putting that work in up front to get the soil more aerated, get some life back into it is, it's a long process, but it really does pay off. So the next question, moving right along, is about cold frames. So let me go over here so I can have a piece of paper so I can read the question better. If I wanted to build a cold frame for this winter, when should I do that? Well, that is great. That's a great question. Actually, I'm going to pause that question because I just saw another question that's related to what we were just talking about. So what are your favorite winter cover crops? Okay, that's a good question. Some really common ones are, well, okay, so in a garden, let's talk about, I'm going to focus on garden appropriate cover crops because we will use different ones at the ag park and at the Veterans Urban Farm because we have different scales and different tools. I'm going to only answer this question as a backyard gardener. So I will be omitting several really popular ones in this answer. When I've done cover crops for winter time in my garden, I like winter wheat. It is just, with cover crops, you want, just like anything, you want more diversity. So if you just plant one cover crop, you're not getting the full range of benefits. But winter wheat is good because it dies with our kind of average winter temperatures here in Columbia, which is really nice because on a home gardener scale, it's really, really hard to kill cover crops, especially if you let them grow to certain ages. So I like winter wheat. You'd need to be planting it this month for it to start, for it to get, big enough. Can you even see big enough to kind of start going dormant in the winter. And then what will normally happen is in January or something, the low temperatures will kill it. And then you'll just kind of have this straw kind of, that's rooted into the soil, but will protect the soil, but it will be dead next spring, which is really nice. The winter just kills it. Another one that we've done with success and not with success, depending, on the season, is I've done Austrian winter peas as well with, I think, oats, and those are also supposed to winter kill. I've had years where they do, and I've had years where they don't. So I think it's more nuanced than just it does or doesn't die. I think it really matters on the low temperatures and how rough the winter is and how dry the winter is, because dry cold air is way worse than dry wet air or cold wet air. But I will say that Austrian winter peas, even if they don't die with the winter, they're really easy to kill. You just pull them out of your garden bed and they're dead. And then I just let that stuff sit there and decompose into the soil. So I don't pull the winter wheat that's died, that kind of straw stuff that it leaves behind. And if I have to kill the Austrian winter peas, I don't pull it out and put it in my compost pile. I leave it in the garden. So it does look messy, but the whole point is that decomposing plant matter is feeding the soil, and then by extension feeding your plants. I have tried lots of other cover crops in my garden over winter, and invariably had a lot of hard time killing them, the following May or April or whatever. And so those would be the ones I suggest for a backyard gardener. Okay. So let's talk about cold frames. All right, let's repeat that question because I kind of got off on a tangent. Sorry. If I wanted to build a cold frame this winter, when should I do that? That's a great question. I just moved into this garden, so I'm in the process of installing my own cold frame. So I thought I would show them to you. So I'm going to, yes, okay. So here we are again. These are my cold frames. Hello. I got the one on the left has 2 different varieties of kale in it that we planted maybe about 3 weeks ago now, in preparation for trying to overwinter them, or at least extend the growing season. So I weeded them this weekend. I thinned them a little bit this weekend. They're doing all right. A mold did kind of burrow under them and uproot some of them, and that's why the middle kind of died, but I think it's all okay. This next one I'm going to install and plant spinach in. but we're still a little early for spinach. It's going to be in the 80s this week, which is too warm to plant spinach. But anyway, so essentially you want to have the cold frame finished by the time the nights start dipping into the 40s, the 30s. This stuff is cold hardy. It would live through a light frost, and so will the spinach. But the purpose of cold frames is to, make it a zone or so warmer so that they grow a little bit faster, a little bit better over the winter. So my strategy, there's a whole bunch of different types of cold frames. My strategy for this garden this winter, we'll see how it goes, is to have these green kind of plastic frames and then put pipe straps on the inside that hold a like PVC pipe into like an arch. You can see this is what it's going to look like, an arch. And then I have some 5 millimeter plastic that I'm going to cover and weight down on the outside. So it's going to be kind of look like a Conestoga wagon, if you will. And in that way, I'm going to collect the radiation from the sun, and it will be warmer, but it will be kind of taller. It will be about 2 feet tall. So that means it won't be low cold frames. It's like a small fish tank. Like it gets so hot and so cold, so hot, so cold, so fast. I want it to be a little bit taller so that it doesn't hit those extremes so fast, so I don't have to come out here every single morning to raise the plastic. Otherwise it'll fry my plants. I just try and make it a little easier on myself. So anyway, so having that structure in place by late October is ideal. I think the question didn't ask this, and so maybe they didn't need to know this, but I will give this opinion as well. I think it's more important to make sure you plant your plants on time, because you need the plants to be big enough to cover. You can't, for many things, if you want to eat them this winter, you can't build the high or the low tunnel or the cold frame in October and then also plant your kale then, because you're not going to get kale in the wintertime if you've waited then. A lot of stuff for season extension, you need to plant in August and in September. So you need to do that right now so that you have plants to protect, because the sunlight's waning, and I just feel like these plants I feel like they don't grow as fast this time of year. I've never been able to put my finger on it, but I just have this hunch that they don't grow as fast in the fall as they do in the spring. I don't have any science to back that up other than just my decade of watching things. But anyway, so you need to really get those seeds in the ground, and then you can do what I'm doing, which is you're building your cold frame around your plants. I hope that answers your question. Okay, let's move on. Okay, what flowers and plants can I plant for pollinators such as bees, wasps, and butterflies? Okay, good question. So the easy answer to that is flowers of all different colors, shapes, and bloom times. So right now, really all I've got flowering in my garden is zinnias. They're beautiful. There's not a lot of activity on them at this precise moment because it's just warming up, and it was a little cool and dewy, so it's going to take the insects some time to get going today. Oh, there's one. You might not be able to see it. Some sort of oh, and there's another one. Yeah, so we've got a bumblebee, some sort of butterfly. I don't know a lot about butterflies, but anyway, I wouldn't say zinnias are the best plant to plant for pollinators. I'm going to walk to another part of our garden, if you excuse me. I would recommend wildflowers because that is, more native and appropriate to our climate, obviously, since they're native. So here we go. Here's a great one for this time of year. This is a goldenrod. I'm not sure what type of goldenrod is, but we have it growing all over. This is actually just outside my garden fence, but we have it growing all over right now. It's a late season bloomer, so it's like this, what beekeepers call like a nectar flow. So a lot of bees will hit this because it's one of the few flowering native plants right now. So essentially, kind of the rule of thumb is to have different colored flowers blooming at all times of the season that have different flower structures. And that way, in that way, you can attract and provide habitat for the most diverse species of bees, butterflies, moths, and like flies, beetles, all of these, most insects are pollinators of some sort because everything likes nectar. It's just sugar, it's just carbs. And the more diverse ways to provide the nectar, the more pollinators you're going to support in your garden. So I was thinking that next year maybe I would just have, for every like garden bed in my own garden, I would just have a different type of flower that blooms and plan it so that there's different blooms throughout the different like months of the gardening season to provide that habitat. Following up on more flower questions is, are hummingbirds attracted to certain plants? Yeah, they're attracted to certain flower structures and colors. Red, like kind of tube-shaped flowers. So we've got some over here that I'll show you. Hummingbirds won't be out at this time of day, so I wouldn't expect to see any hummingbirds fluttering by. But I'll show you what we've got. Cardinal flower is kind of the big like poster child of native flowers that attract hummingbirds. There's a native honeysuckle that's a vine that they really like as well. It's kind of more of a coral color, but it's kind of like a trumpet shape. And then of course trumpet vine, which is another native, but it's pretty aggressive. So a lot of people don't plant it. It's more considered a weed, is a great one. So like anything in the orange or red spectrum, color spectrum, that has kind of like a tube trumpet shaped flower. That's what hummingbirds like. Let's go look at one. Well, not a hummingbird, but let's go look at a flower that they like. And I'm going to, disregard the construction project. So we are headed over to my neighbor's wildflower patch. Hi, Lava. So my neighbor has these wonderful wildflowers. And so hummingbirds seem to be most active in the evening from what I've noticed. I'm no expert. And they've really been hitting a lot of the flowers in this patch, but particularly the red ones. So again, red tube-shaped flowers. Oh gosh. That kind of have these like long nectar like necks, so they can stick their kind of long beaks in. That's kind of what they're going for. All right. All right, so let's answer one more question. Okay, going to turn this back around. We're going to answer a composting question. Okay, composting question. So the last question that we're going to answer today is, how can I start composting at home easily without a smell in my kitchen? That's a good question. I think that's an important question because it's important even if it's hard to have a compost pile in a for just a home setting. We can talk about why that's difficult. It's really important to keep that kind of stuff out of the landfill because, I'm not sure exactly what the precise statistic is, but a good percentage, anywhere I've heard between 20 and 25% of the things that we collectively throw away can break down and be composted. That's a lot of things that we can keep out of the landfill. So, we should all just do our part to keep that out of the landfill. So, how do you do it at your home so it's not gross and smelly? So in my kitchen we have the standard gallon plastic ice cream container that has the lid on it. It's right next to our sink. We put all of our food scraps in that. Once that's full, we transfer it to a 5-gallon bucket. You can see 2 of them right there. One's for things that the chickens will eat. One's for things that are just going to go into the compost pile. You see they both have lids. Flies and maggots still, honestly, to be totally honest, still exist in it. But I just find that's like just what happens. And then our compost pile is in the back of our garden. So once the 5-gallon buckets are full or, half full, I'll take them back to the compost pile and dump them out and then rinse out the buckets and start all over again. So it's a series of closed containers that get larger, and then our compost pile is about as far away from our house as we can get it. And that's that. In your backyard, what I would suggest you do to keep your compost from smelling is to get some sort of carbon material that's really fine. So like sawdust is really great. We used to use a lot of horse bedding from Stevens Stables, which is kind of like sawdusty. There is manure in it, but it's mostly like the bedding from the stalls. And putting that on each time you add a 5-gallon bucket of compost or food scraps to it, and cover it so that you can't see any of the food scraps. And in that kind of ratio, it's very unscientific, but that kind of ratio keeps the smell down and keeps your pile, breaking down, making compost if you're producing enough food scraps. It really depends on how much you cook and how many food scraps you create as a household, how well your compost pile will do. Because again, it's just like kind of like the large containers for overwintering plants. Like you need a large container for the thermal mass. You also need a large container for, you need a large pile of compost to keep it warm enough so that the bacteria does its thing. Okay, so I didn't answer all of the questions. I don't know if I have time to answer all the questions. So we will just pick this up next week with more of your questions. Please let me know if you have any questions that we didn't cover today, or if I didn't answer something more thoroughly enough, please let me know. And we just love keeping this dialogue open. Alrighty, bye, have a good day.